Where companies get it wrong is when, quite simply, it's everybody else has a Pride Month capsule, why don't we? You can't come at it from something like that because it automatically doesn't have the heart. But I gotta be honest, I really don't think most brands do that.
Yeah.
Most of the time when we have conversations, they really come wanting to do the best that they possibly can with the best of intentions.
Hi, I'm Jason Harris, and you're listening to Soul and Science. Fast forward your marketing mind in about 20 minutes. In celebration of Pride Month, we've been focusing on brands that both address and uplift the LGBTQ plus community. And today, to round out the month, we're talking with Ross von Metzke, Director of Communications and Public Relations at It Gets Better. It all started more than a decade ago in 2010, when more than 70,000 people took to social media to share their stories and provide hope and encouragement to young LGBTQ plus people. Today, It Gets Better is a nonprofit that reaches millions and millions of young people all over the world through inspiring media programming, educational resources, and much more. Ross is a communications and PR specialist with over 12 years experience working in the nonprofit and multimedia space. He co-created and ran ITMFA, which raised more than $1 million for Planned Parenthood, ACLU, and the International Refugee Assistance Project. You should look up what ITMFA stands for, because I don't feel comfortable saying it. Ross has also been published in Newsweek, the LA Times, The Advocate, Entertainment Weekly, and even 17 magazine. In this episode, you're going to learn how a nonprofit like It Gets Better measures success considering some of the recent anti-LGBTQ plus state measures and the Pride Month backlash. You also get a reminder that if allyship was easy, it wouldn't be so important. If you want to support the queer community, don't bail at the first sign of controversy. You also hear about some of It Gets Better's most successful campaigns, plus who they reached and why it worked. And you'll hear some practical advice on how to reach this community in an authentic way. All right, let's dive right in and fast forward our marketing minds. You talked about being published in 17 magazine as well as Entertainment Weekly. Which was your favorite place to be published?
As a gay kid coming of age in New York City, which was where I went for my first internship, my first two published jobs were in YM, which doesn't exist anymore, which was Young and Modern or Young Miss, however you choose to remember it, and 17. And so I really set out, I wanted to be a serious journalist covering news or maybe travel or something lofty. And my first assignment was to tag along with 98 Degrees and Jessica Simpson to Total Request Live at 19 years old. So it's of an era. It's very random, but it's an experience I'll never forget. And one very few people have. So I love it.
Did you kind of study communications and marketing, or did you study something else and find your way into it?
Yeah, I actually went to school first as a theater major. I made it exactly one semester and realized that that level of rejection was not good for my mental health. And so I needed to find another avenue, and I found journalism. And I've always loved writing. I've always loved storytelling. I wrote for the San Diego Union Tribune even when I was in high school. They had like a Young Voices high school column that I contributed to.
Awesome.
So it was always something I loved. And then I joined the school paper, got these internships in New York, and graduated college shortly after 9/11. And we all know what that did to the publishing industry. And so I really wasn't sure what a career in journalism would look like for me. But, I had some really cool options to freelance. At one point, dabbled in starting my own magazine, which was just an experiment, but kind of went belly up. And then I found myself working for, writing for Entertainment Weekly briefly, freelancing for the LA Times, doing some really exciting stuff. And then I wound up at The Advocate, kind of at that key moment when Prop 8 was happening in Southern California and marriage equality was huge discussion, and launched advocate.com as the first editor of advocate.com. And that was kind of my 3 or 4 year stint in serious cause-oriented journalism. And I loved it. Journalism with a mission was always kind of at the core of what I gravitated toward. And, it was a pure happenstance that I met somebody who was very close to one of the board members of It Gets Better when that moment took off, and they needed somebody that understood journalism, PR, and social media. And I just sort of happened to have all three. And I was looking for a change and I took a jump and it paid off.
We do a lot of nonprofit work as well. We do a lot of social good initiatives combating sexual assault, anti-hate, trying to create, civic engagement and voter turnout. And I always think that doing that, giving back and working for nonprofits, it's always so good for the heart and soul of the company. It seems like that's sort of where you wound up. What makes Ross Ross?
I'm really good at picking my battles and knowing when something is really worth fighting for because I just can't see it playing out any other way. I just wouldn't be able to really live with the result. And when it's just not that big a deal and I need to get out of my own way. I think I've noticed in this business a lot of people spend a lot of time arguing over really minor details that at the end of the day, 99.9% of the people paying attention won't know the difference. And it's just such a waste of time and energy. And I've learned how to quickly diffuse situations either with humor or some sort of off the cuff remark that just sort of, for lack of a better term, kind of sucks the air out of the room and lets everybody realize, what are we really fighting for here? Are we really fighting over a word choice in this sentence? Or is there something more important that we can be doing? Because there's too much to conquer during the day. I don't have the time to nitpick over every little thing.
Yeah, I love that. Tell us a little bit about the mission for It Gets Better. How did it kind of begin and then snowball into, not a kind of one-off campaign or idea, but kind of turned into an ongoing organization?
Yeah, well, I sometimes I call it the accidental nonprofit because it really did start as this viral video movement kind of before the ice bucket challenges of the world and all those things we know. It was kind of this first viral moment on YouTube where unfortunately it was born out of an upswing in coverage of young LGBTQ people or perceived to be LGBTQ people taking their own lives as a result of bullying. And the adults in the community really wanted to get in front of kids and convey the message that high school and middle school and all of this, these feelings of angst and frustration and depression and uncertainty that you feel can be very temporary. And you age out of it, you find your community, you get an education, you move to a new town, you find that one adult that really sees you and understands you, and your life can change in an instant for the better. And so at the beginning, it really was focused on adults reaching kids and trying to communicate that message to them. And as we've evolved and become this fully fledged nonprofit, we've really kind of morphed into more kids or slightly older, kind of that mentor, older sibling role, speaking to kids and conveying that message. And it really is become this sort of preventative care measure that really focuses on reaching young people before they're in crisis. I think a lot of people hear It Gets Better and it's like this pie in the sky idea, but we're seeing it right now. Like there's this all out attack against queer youth in this country, and it doesn't feel like it's getting better. But when you're better resourced and educated and equipped and surrounded by community to kind of navigate the world when it lets you down and spits in your face, the better off you are to kind of survive those hurdles and really thrive. And I think, we have amazing storytelling programming on Twitch and TikTok where we're actively engaged in conversation with kids. We have our, media program and storytelling and social media. We have our education program that takes that programming and gives educational resources to it so that teachers can introduce it in the classroom. And just by nature of having it available to kids, say, hey, I see you, I'm an ally. And then we also have a global arm where we're on 4 different continents, 6 major languages, and closing in on 20 countries around the world, just focusing on making things better overall for LGBTQ plus youth.
We've run an initiative for about a decade called It's On Us, which fights sexual assault on college campuses. And the numbers get worse because more people are talking about the assaults that happen. There's more reporting, so the numbers are getting worse. So on one hand, it looks like the initiative's not changing the tide, but it is because people are speaking about it and they're raising their voices. So how do you guys approach measuring the effectiveness? Is it how many people you reach versus like changing societal statistics? How do you think about success at It Gets Better?
Well, I think we can look at it in a few ways. And first off, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, when we encourage a culture that tells women, we believe you and we will listen to you, and encourages women to report those cases of sexual assault, of course, you're going to see the numbers go up because
Yep.
there's an increase in reporting. I think what we're seeing right now is an actual, for the first time, nuanced conversation around mental health in this country, and nuanced conversation on what are these laws and bills and anti-LGBTQ rhetoric. What are we really doing to our kids? And so kids are speaking out and people are being more upfront about it. So we are seeing those numbers reported in greater detail. I don't think that mental health issues among anyone, but particularly young people, and particularly young people in marginalized communities, I don't think they've ever been great in this country. I think we've always had a problem. I think where we're at right now is that, to your point, people are speaking about it more. And also, to your point, we actually have resources to help navigate it, that it's becoming more of the norm in terms of a cultural conversation. So, we can manage any number of things. At the beginning with It Gets Better, It Gets Better came around. We were just getting hate crime protections at the federal level. Marriage equality didn't exist yet. There were all sorts of things in this country that hadn't come to pass. And I do think with visibility comes a cultural shift. And so, not directly saying that It Gets Better brought about marriage equality, but it certainly helped this groundswell of support for our community. And now, because we're so present in the digital space and because we do work so hand in hand with mental health resource tools, and a lot of our TikTok is around, sort of bolstering your mental health and quick tips that you can enact throughout the day if you find yourself spiraling or, fixating on a crisis. Um, just the sheer number of comments and shares and folks who react to that content and ask for more of it really indicates to us that there's this real desire and hunger to see more content in that space.
In our world in advertising, there's this right wing war on pride. They're really trying to make kind of pride toxic for brands. And I guess, how did we get here? And how do you think of brands? Because a lot of them are sort of scaling, it seems like scaling back, not just here, but in other areas of diversity, because they don't want the headache.
I'm going to start with the positive because It Gets Better. We're very fortunate that this year we work with a ton of brands, and the vast majority of them have been incredibly supportive, if not more so this year than in years past. And we can get to some of them later that I think are doing a superb job. But what's interesting is we're hearing a lot about this now, but this isn't new. And I look back, It Gets Better actually had a situation like this several years ago. We did a campaign with Doritos. It was the Rainbow Pride chip. And, they brought out the Doritos in rainbow colors, and Frito-Lay dumped a ton of marketing support into it. And along comes former governor, Republican presidential hopeful Mike Huckabee saying that we are trying to go after and groom the children, and this huge kerfluffle happens, and the Pride chip doesn't go into a second production. But you know what? We got a ton of press around that. Frito-Lay raised over $100,000 for our organization. The following year, that had blown over, and they relaunched the campaign in Mexico. And now every year, without fail, we get emails from people asking for the Pride chip. We've still got a bag in our office. I can't imagine they're edible. But that it was a big deal. And so looking at some of these brands today, it's not new. It's disappointing. It's unfortunate. I wish these brands understood that allyship is not playing both sides against the middle. I'm not quoting myself. There's a commentator, Erica Cobb, who I was listening to the other day, who said allyship isn't easy because the communities that you're aligning yourselves with don't have it easy. And so if you're going to bail the minute it gets difficult, were you really an ally to begin with? And that's when we talk about like performative marketing and performative allyship. That's what these brands are going to be remembered for. And so I'm just thankful that this year, the brands that we work with kind of saw what was happening and went the other way.
You seem very zen about it, actually. I guess you have thick skin.
I also recognize that a lot of these decisions are made by one or two people at the top of the chain, and that the folks that I'm dealing with on a daily basis are devastated to see this. But then I try and focus on brand partners that we've worked with for years, like Converse, who continue to just impress me with the innovation behind the projects that they deliver. They involve representation from a wide swath of communities at their company. They're very engaged on the grassroots community organizing level. They support organizations big and small. They really put their money where their mouth is. Their campaigns are very intentional. They employ queer artists. They get it. And so for every brand that kind of gets spooked and takes a step back for a year or two, I know they'll be back. But
Yeah.
I try to focus on the brands that have been really loyal to us, and that it seems to be in their company's core values to stay the course with this community and with other marginalized communities.
You mentioned Converse. Do you have any other like one or two brands that you've worked with that do things really well?
Yeah, one last year that I thought did a great campaign is a company called Banter under Piercing Pagoda. It's like when you go to the mall and you get your ear pierced. It was
All right.
Claire's when I was in high school,
All
but
right.
it was right after the Don't Say Gay bill, and they came out with a necklace that said Say Gay. And the proceeds went to the It Gets Better Project. And it was a very mild political statement. You know, they weren't doing a ton of press going anti Florida and such, but like merely by making that the slogan on their necklace, anytime I wore it, inherently it sparked a conversation about what was going on in this country. And so that brand, I think, enabled me, and I imagine other people, to have conversations that they wouldn't ordinarily have. And to me, that's power in marketing.
That's a great example. I
Yeah,
love
we
that.
also have worked for years with American Eagle, and they have a campaign that launched a couple of years ago that enabled us to do our first major grants initiative in the United States. And you want to talk about supporting folks where it's really needed. We, as of the airing of this podcast, will have been able to distribute more than $1 million to schools in the United States and Canada, supporting these micro projects up to $10,000 each, that work to uplift and empower LGBTQ students in schools. So it's anything from building a gender inclusive closet to the school's first Pride Parade float to getting LGBTQ literature in the library to inclusive education training for teachers so that they can have queer safe spaces at their school. And these are projects that were pitched from students and teachers and funded almost entirely by American Eagle customers, because what they did was they make a donation, but also during Pride Month, when you go to checkout or you check out online, you have the option to add money for the It Gets Better project. And, you know, these are customers, people just like you and me around the United States who added $5, $10, $15, whatever it was. And it tallied up to this massive pool of money that we've now distributed around the country to put some power back in the hands of kids where it actually belongs.
What are one or two initiatives that you've done that have had outsized success, that maybe started small and had like a big impact?
You know, we did a web series last year that I'm really proud of called Queer Sex Ed. And I didn't develop it. It's our brand marketing director, who's a genius. Her name's Ebony Munn. And, you know, we really took a look at the lack of inclusive sex education. First of all, sex education in this country is abysmal when you look at the statistics. It's only mandated in a handful of states. And even then, only some of those states are required for it to be scientifically accurate. So you can kind of teach whatever you want. Um, and when you think about LGBTQ plus youth who are getting most of their information about sex on the internet or even pornography, it's not accurate. And so we created this series of young groups of friends having really frank conversations about their sexual experiences, while two licensed professional sex educators listened on and then kind of came in to join the conversation and debunked a bunch of myths, expanded the conversation where they felt it was lacking. And I've just been astounded how many schools and outlets and parents have gravitated toward this content, because it just doesn't really exist. And, you know, we don't do this for awards per se, but they're fun and exciting. And think that series won 8 tellies, a couple of shorties, a couple of webbies. Like, it's really well regarded. And when we sat down to conceive of that series, we were nervous because, one of the things that's often levied against our community is, you're grooming our kids. How dare you talk to them about sex? But if they're not learning about sex from somebody responsible, they're learning about it somewhere. And if they're learning about it wrong, their health and their safety is at risk. And I don't think any of us wants a child to be harmed from lack of education.
I think one thing that would be hard about for you and the team is there's almost a never ending amount of work to be done and a never ending amount of, global programs, education programs. How do you determine, where you're putting your resources?
A lot of it is figuring out where we're best equipped to tackle a problem or tackle a need and lean in there. A lot of our work is informed by the young people that we work with. We have a youth voices advisory board that we talk to on a regular basis. We want to know what excites them, what interests them, what bores them, because if we're putting money into an initiative that none of them are gravitating toward, then that's a miss. And so we absolutely, have our little marketing research team. They're much more capable than that, but we can call them that for purposes of this. That we really talk to and listen to and inform a lot of our ideas.
This episode's part of our Pride Month series. What insights about the community do you wish marketers understood better?
I feel like this is going to be a common answer with everybody you talk to, but it's true. I think people assume that we're a monolith, and we're not. In the early days of marketing to our community, it was so scarce that, like, the gay men were marketed to by a shirtless Absolute ad, and the lesbians were marketed to by Subaru and Home Depot, and that was it.
Right.
And they're stereotypes and they're dated. We're dealing with a wide range of identities and experiences, and you cannot possibly reach all of them with one marketing campaign. They have interests and passions that have nothing to do with their identities. And I think just coming in and saying, we have this great idea for a Love Wins shirt and everybody's going to love it is just very, it's performative and it makes a lot of assumptions. I think the brands that I work with that come in with representation at the table, that are paying attention to what's going on in the world and want to make an actual impact, that have a call to action around what it is they want to do, and actual, yes, this is a product, yes, this is a shoe, yes, this is a marketing tactic, but also here are some resources and here are some actions you can take to really serve this community. If there's some intentionality behind it, it just makes it that much more authentic and that much easier to sell to our audience. Because I can tell you, especially LGBTQ plus youth, they call bullshit really quickly. They can tell when something doesn't feel authentic. I think where companies get it wrong is when, quite simply, it's everybody else has a Pride Month capsule, why don't we?
Hmm.
You can't come at it from something like that because it automatically doesn't have the heart.
Yeah. It's just a bandwagon.
Yeah. But I gotta be honest, I really don't think most brands do that. Most
Yeah.
of the time when we have conversations, and maybe it's by reputation of how involved we get with our brand partners, they really come wanting to do the best that they possibly can with the best of intentions. And they want to make sure that it's perceived as authentic and not a cash grab.
When you are thinking about your marketing, do you rely more on solar science, more on your experience and your gut on what will work? Or do you rely more on data and insights or talking to the community to make decisions?
I feel like most of your guests probably say a mix, and I'm going to
Of
probably
course.
join the fray. I will
Yep.
say this. I think for the bulk of my career, it was 75% soul, 25% science. And I really do think that's because I've also learned what feels right and what just for some reason doesn't sit right with me. And I've learned to trust my gut. And sometimes my gut is wrong, but I would much rather my gut be wrong and it would have worked than not listen to my gut and it's an absolute unmitigated disaster, because those you can't walk back from as quickly. That said, the older I get, and especially working with some folks on my team who have went to school for public health or went to school for business and live and die by the numbers. I've learned to trust data more, but I've learned to trust data more as this is my gut. This is what I think makes sense. Now let me go find the data to support that. And if I can't find the data to support that, then maybe my gut is wrong. But most of the time I can.
What's an unpopular but important decision that you've made since you've been at It Gets Better?
The big one is we hadn't really done much in the in-person event space, mostly because we're a youth-focused organization and you're not going to ask a 15-year-old for $50 for a ticket to a soiree or what have you. But there was a point where I think it was clear that we just needed to be out in the fundraising space. And we did these series of events in LA, New York, and Miami that were like these poolside cocktail party soirees for the organization that did really, really well. And folks really, really liked them. And they were very sponsorable. And there was some hesitation at the beginning to make them work. And I think they were a lot of fun. And it was cool to show that a youth-facing organization can still do fundraisers targeting adults and actually get your mission in there somehow.
How do you describe your business style in one word?
Empathetic. I'm trying really hard as a Gemini who talks a lot to listen a lot more and to really absorb what it is I'm hearing, because I don't think the best decisions are made from one experience. I think they need to be made from a variety of experiences, and I can only know what I know.
What is the best part of your job and what is the worst part of your job?
The best part of my job has become very easy to answer, and it was answered very quickly during COVID, and that is, as much as everybody was kind of in this boat of uncertainty and working from home, I got to close my laptop at the end of the day and say, I actually did something I care about today. Like I actually helped somebody and I actually gave a shit about what happened in those 8 hours where some of my friends just realized how much they hated their jobs. I just felt a lot better about who I was as a human being at the end of the workday because of the work that we do. And I realized, especially during COVID, how important that is. It's also the worst part of the job, unfortunately, because you talk about legislation about kids who live in states like Florida and Texas, and we work with those kids who were scared for their safety, for the safety of their parents. And this isn't work that I can check at the door. I may close my laptop at 6 p.m., but I'm still thinking about those kids and I'm still thinking about, the future of this country. It's not the same as punching at a time clock and going home and you don't think about it until 10 a.m. Like it's a part of my DNA. It's who I am as a human being.
I love that. Do you have a favorite quote or mantra?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to Brené because I really think she's just inherently smart and quotable and really gets our community. And she said something essentially, if you want to make a difference, the next time you see someone being cruel to another human being, you better take it personally because it is personal. And I remember that every day because I think we're seeing a lot now. Parents who don't have queer kids being like, why is this important to me? Well, you have a 10-year-old. You have no idea if you have a queer kid or not. You may, and you may not. And your kid's friend might be queer. I don't understand why something needs to be personal or you need to experience it directly for you to care about the well-being and the rights of another human being. And that's something that's always been lost on me. I don't need to directly walk in your shoes or understand your experience to know that you're deserving of love and empathy and rights and respect. And I think that quote really gets at the heart of that.
I love that quote. Everyone deserves love and safety, and it should be personal for everyone.
Absolutely.
This was great. Thank you for letting us get to know Ross more and getting to know It Gets Better more. We absolutely love the work that you do, and I think there's really no better calling than that. So we really appreciate the time and all the work that you do.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you too.
Soul and Science is a Mechanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, Tyler Nielsen, Emma Swanson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris.